I think I would still take Michigan ahead of Duke as number one. And I still think those two are a tier above Arizona.
I just don't think there's that dominant team. I think you can throw maybe 7 teams in a hat and say, like, I think it's matchup dependent. I would not put Arizona behind Duke and Michigan. I wouldn't put them a tier below.
Hey everybody, welcome to the EvanMiya College Basketball Show. I'm your host, Evan Miyakawa, and we just witnessed arguably the greatest weekend of college basketball that we will see this regular season until we get to March Madness. The big ticket item was those two top 4 clashes that we saw on Saturday. Duke beats number 1 Michigan and Washington, D.C. in a very defensive battle. That was a great game. And then Arizona goes into Houston without Koa Pete and battling through some adversity and beats Houston on their home floor. UCLA had an overtime thriller against Illinois, buzzer-beating layup to win the game. That was awesome. Kansas was stunned at home by Cincinnati, and so much more to get to. Super packed show today. Jeff Goodman is on deck here with me in a second to talk about the weekend, and later on in the show, Will Warren will be joining us to talk about some more games and pick our Final Four teams as of this moment. Also, in this week's Analytics Corner, we're going to talk about updated injury impact for teams that are missing some star players. There's been a lot of that going around in the sport right now, plus some takeaways from the latest efficiency landscape graph that I just put out on social media. If you're a listener of this show, thank you so much. It means a lot. Please leave us a review on Apple or Spotify, or if you watch on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. It really helps grow the show as we ramp up towards March. I've got a lot of fun things planned for that month. All right, it is time to get into the big storylines of the week. And here with me to do that is the one and only Jeff Goodman from Field of 68. And he has specifically requested me to mention how I have slighted him by having him appear after all of these other people on the show before him. So that would be John Fanta, Jeff Borzello, Kevin Sweeney, Matt Norlander, Fran Fraschilla, Rob Doster, Ryan Hammer. T.O. was on last week. So you're really bottom of the barrel here.
This is amazing. I mean, this is amazing, and I'm doing this for free. Like, not only am I, like, the last guy that you reached out to, possibly. I mean, like, honestly, I don't even know who else can go. I mean, I feel like I can't believe Lenardi. I mean, Lenardi must have said no.
He's going to be on the show in 2 weeks.
All right, there you go. So you already got him booked. I mean, I was like a last minute. I'm sure somebody bailed. And you needed somebody, so you called me like 10 minutes ago, and I'm honored.
That is absolutely not what happened. I saved you for when people are going to be paying the most attention to the show, so that's the logic.
Good excuse. I'll take it, though. I'll take it. No. It's good to see you doing this. I'm glad that you've added this to your stable of information. You're about as good as it gets out there. You and I did the mock bracket. Media bracket the other day in Indy, and I learned a lot. It was a little bit overload in numbers. I will say that for me, but for you, it was just a normal day.
Yeah, we saw each other a lot more this week than we normally do, and we're capping it off here. So you're probably going to be sick of me after this is over.
Never.
Well, let's talk for a little bit before we're sick of each other. I want to start with the big title, the top 4 clashes that we had in college basketball, and I think Duke and Michigan is where I want to start here. Squaring off in Washington, D.C. on Saturday evening. Duke wins this game 68-63. This was a very proper defensive battle. I think it started out pretty on fire out of the gates, both teams, but it turned out that the top 2 defenses in the land really showed up for this one. I think for me, the battle of the stars was really significant. Cameron Boozer versus Yaxel Lendeborg. Boozer was great, 18 points, 10 rebounds. Yaxel also had a great game, especially in the first half, 21 points, a bunch of threes. I think both front courts really delivered in this game as expected, but I thought Duke's backcourt was a really big edge in this game, considering that it was an unknown who was going to show up better there, and Duke kind of led for the entire second half. So this game was awesome. What were your biggest takeaways from Duke's win over the number 1 team in the country on Saturday?
I mean, obviously the biggest one was, hey, you know what? We kind of had Duke as a second-tier team, and I picked them to win the whole thing in the preseason. And even I was like, what am I doing here? The more you watch him, the more you're like, other than Boozer, not blown away. Isaiah Evans has been inconsistent, hasn't been the guy that I thought he'd be. the point guard position still hasn't really been solidified as a strength. Gamba's been great. And he was really good in that game. And I thought, a key, like you said, Duke's perimeter was good, but I thought a key was, standing up to Michigan's big on the glass. That was huge because those bigs, they got three of them. We know Mara got in foul trouble, but we know what Boozer can do. But I think Patrick Gamba is so underrated in what he does. And, to me, he's so good defensively, big, strong, plays hard, kind of protects Boozer. I said it a couple weeks ago. I said he's kind of like that hockey enforcer that protects the top player. And I think he allows Boozer, again, defensively to not take plays off, but not have to work quite as hard in there. But I think, again, the biggest thing, it made a statement for Duke on a neutral court, which probably wasn't quite neutral. My guess is it was like 75-25 in favor of Duke in D.C. But the fact that they could beat this team that a lot of people had put on a pedestal above everybody else, especially when we saw them at Mackey against Purdue, I thought that was really impressive. And again, surprised but not surprised.
I agree with your point on Patrick Ngongba. You made fun of me for this last year. I think Patrick Ngongba is this year's Dylan Cardwell, a guy who is the other big man next to a National Player of the Year type caliber player who goes under the radar by a lot of people. And right now I have him rated as in terms of value on the court, top 10 player in the sport based on how he's impacting Duke. And there's been a clear difference in how good Duke has played when he's been available and not in foul trouble versus not. What do you think overall of Cameron Boozer passing this test against Michigan's front court? Because he has now played against Michigan and Florida, who would be the two best, biggest, most NBA-like front courts in the country. And he's passed both of those tests with flying colors. Against Florida, he had 29 points, 6 rebounds. In this game, it was more of a facilitator role, but 18 points, 10 rebounds, 7 assists, close to a double-double in this game. So very encouraging for me. What were your takeaways there on that side of things?
So many guys in his position who have come in, and everybody's talking about Darryn Peterson and A.J. DeBonsa being 1 and 2. So many guys would try to prove that they're the number one pick, right? And try to do things that maybe people say they can't. This dude just plays within himself every single game. Plays hard. And we've seen this. Now, I've watched him now. This is my 4th year maybe watching him, dating back to the AAU circuit. Might be the 5th even. I might have seen him under 15, 16, 17s, and now this year. And I'm not kidding. I've never seen this kid take a day off or a playoff. He's that consistent with his effort, his approach, his maturity. And I think that's the thing, man. He's all about winning. All they did was win in high school AAU. And again, that's why I picked him in the preseason to win it all, even though I wasn't blown away by some of the guys around him. But man, what he's done to expand his game, because when I first saw him, he was primarily a guy that would score from 12, 15 and in. And now he can make threes. He really passes the ball well. He doesn't force anything. And again, he's not trying to prove all right, everybody's saying I can't score over length. I'm going to go in there, get me the ball, and I'm going to show people I can score over Mara or Yaxel or Merez. No. It's hey, I'm going to take what the defense gives me, and if they're doubling me, I'm going to move the ball. I'm going to move the ball and get my teammates the ball in good spots.
Yeah, I just want to put in context what Cameron Boozer is doing this year, because he has been, since basically 3-4 weeks into the season, the front runner for National Player of the Year. No one has really come close, so there's not really been much of a discussion. And I think that's actually doing him a disservice, because it's oh yeah, Cameron Boozer was great again tonight, ho-hum. But if you put this, I just want to put a little bit of perspective on this. So on this season, Cameron Boozer is averaging 22.5 points, 10 rebounds, 4.5 assists, almost 2 steals a game. He is shooting 64% from 2 and almost 40% from 3. Big picture, in terms of his overall value, on my website at evanmiya.com, I have Bayesian performance rating, which is my metric for measuring your offense and defense and overall how valuable you are. His BPR right now is 14.06. That is the second best season I have going back to 2009 when my database begins. The only player who has a better season is that Zach Edey 24 season. and that was just a little bit ahead. He is comfortably better than Cooper Flagg was, where he finished last year. He's got the best overall statistical output in terms of his box score statistics. I think there's an argument it's better than Zion's season that he had in 2018. So he has been
He's just kind of – the problem is with Cam Boozer, we say it over and over again, he's not flashy. So you're watching him. He's not Cooper Flagg where he's got the ball in his hands and he can just make plays, right? And Cooper was pretty athletic, and a white dude who was pretty athletic. Zion was a freak. I don't think Cam Boozer's a great defender. I think he's a good team defender is what he is. He's super smart. He's in the right place, but he's not a guy who again, he's not a big-time shot blocker or shot alterer. But, man, he's a winner. He's a winner. He does everything well. I mean, think of John Shire, like how fortunate he's been the last 2 years to have Cooper Flagg and Cam Boozer, the two best players in the sport. But beyond that, like two guys that are all about intangibles, winning, not trying to like do more than, again, what they need to do. Like just, hey, and you can see it with their teammates. Like that's how you can tell. Like, and both of them, like Cooper didn't do a single one-on-one interview all last year. I don't think Cam really has either, like other than post-game stuff. And I think part of it is this thing of like, I don't want it to be about me. And they don't even like the attention. It's not like they're not where they don't like the media or they're disrespectful to the media or when they talk to the media. They just don't give a shit. They don't care about the attention. It's great. It's great.
Yeah. It's awesome. Okay, let's move on to the other big clash that we had on Saturday. This was maybe a slightly more surprising result. Arizona goes on the road against Houston and wins 73-66. And this was a pretty much full game in control effort from Arizona. They led for all but I think 3 minutes of this game. Houston took the lead, I think 50-48 with 12 minutes to go. And then they did not score. Houston did not score a single point till 4:32. So almost a 8-minute stretch there. And it really showcases Arizona's defensiveness and why I have them rated as a top 3 defense behind Michigan and Duke. But for me, the story of this game for Arizona was overcoming adversity. Koa Pete, again, not available in this game. In addition, both of their other bigs, Tobe Awaka and Mo Krivas, fouled out. Braden Burries was reportedly sick and not at his best, and they still go on the road against a very hungry Houston team who wanted this win after losing at Iowa State earlier in the week, and they win this one. I'm just so impressed with Arizona. They're never going to stick out as the most fun, flashy team, but when it comes to fundamentals and grit and all that stuff, they get it done every time.
Yeah, they don't make a lot of threes. That's not their game. I mean, it's just weird that a Tommy Lloyd team like this is so tough because you think of Arizona, and again, I went to Arizona, so I've known kind of the soft label put on Arizona for years, whether it's even with Lute Olson, some of his teams, but Sean Miller with some of his teams, even though Sean's about as tough as it gets. And now with Tommy Lloyd coming over from Gonzaga. And you take away Pete, you basically take away Burries because he wasn't really very effective at all. Take away Dwayne Aristode, who's one of their better wing defenders and tougher dudes physically. But, man, Karchenkov, he is so good. I don't know where you have him as like defense. I think I tweeted it, like I'm not sure there's 5 better perimeter defenders in the country. And this kid's a freshman, now albeit he played professional basketball in Germany, but still deemed a freshman at this point. Jaden Bradley, tough. He can guard. As you said, like the beauty of Arizona is they've got these 3 bigs. So, and you got Awaka now coming off the bench where he was used to starting for a while. But you had Karchenkov was guarding their 4 most of the game, and he's so tough, and that's huge. But Bradley, Karchenkov, I think those guys kind of they set the tone, and obviously DeLorso scored it. Like he shot it well.
Crazy game.
Yeah, and it's funny. So when DeLorso transferred to Arizona, I remember reaching out to a bunch of CAA coaches because he came from Campbell, the Fighting Camels. And they were almost every one of them was like, I don't think he can play at Arizona. Like, I don't think he's good enough to make that jump. And he's been great for them. And man, yeah, like I just think they did it with their defense and toughness, which is kind of what they had to do against a Houston team that, frankly, like Houston really kind of baffles me in some ways, right? Like they don't have a guy you could throw it to down low at all this year, which I think really makes it far more difficult for Kelvin to try to run and score. It's kind of like now, hey, give Kingston the ball and let him drive middle and see what he can get, because he can usually get by anybody. But I just think the last couple games here, their offense, and they haven't forced turnovers. That's the other thing with Houston lately. Iowa State, I think, had 3. I think Arizona had 5. Mm-hmm. They're one of the best teams at forcing turnovers. And a lot of times you're going to get a lot in transition for Houston. When they double the ball, they turn it, force turnovers, they get easy baskets. They didn't get a lot of easy baskets against Arizona.
Do you like this iteration of Houston? Because this in some good ways and bad ways has been different for Houston this year. They don't normally have a freshman like Kingston Flemings or even a player like Chris Sinak who they can give that meaningful minutes. And in some way that raises their ceiling in some ways because of the athleticism and that sort of thing, but also putting that much on freshmen and, they basically replaced a guy like Jaywan Roberts last year, who was a senior veteran. It feels slightly, they're still playing like Houston basketball, but it feels slightly less Houston than it did last year. And obviously last year was a team that went to a title game, so that's a high bar. But do you like this iteration? Do you think it has the potential to do the same things that the team last year did?
Just not as much of a Kelvin team. Right? I mean, their ceiling's probably higher because you got a guard that can go get one anytime he wants for the most part in Kingston Flemings. But, I watch and I love Kingston. Like, he may be my favorite player in the country to watch.
I agree.
And talk to. He's so much fun. But I think, again, there's a learning curve here, and he's still figuring it out. And I talked to Kelvin about it before the Iowa State game. Like, there's still some ebbs and flows for a guy that, again, could be a top 5 pick, better than talent-wise than he's probably ever coached. And again, you take away something where you don't have a guy to throw the ball down to. And Kelvin said, he's like, there's nothing we can do with that now. Like, we just don't have it, right? We don't have it at this point. That's not Sinak's game. Tugler, certainly that's not how he plays. So I think ultimately you're so reliant right now on your perimeter, and your perimeter is pretty damn good. I mean, again, we know like those dudes can sharp, man, some of the shots he can hit, they're ridiculous. I also think Uzan's like trying to figure it out. Like, he's had major role change over the last 3 years. Major role change. Just when he was starting to get kind of comfortable last year, second half of the year, with the ball in his hands, they changed the whole offense for him. And now it's like, all right, dude, like, you're not really having the ball in your hands anymore. This is Kingston Flemings' show. So I don't have the same level of trust I do in this Houston team. But I will say this, like, they can beat anybody because they got a point guard who is just, since when he's on his A game, forget about it. Forget about it. Like, nobody can stop that kid from getting into the lane and making plays for whether it's scoring for himself or driving and kicking. He's just got to be a little bit more consistent, I think, with his decision making.
Yeah. Okay, so big picture on both of these games that we talked about. The latest AP poll that came out has a reshuffle at the top. AP poll: Duke number 1, Arizona 2, Michigan 3. That's how they're in the current AP poll. Do you think that is the correct order of who you think are actually the best 3 teams in the sport right now? Because for me, I think I would still take Michigan ahead of Duke as number 1, and I still think those 2 are a tier above Arizona in 3rd. Would you agree with that?
No, yes and no. Yes, I would take Michigan number 1 still, and people would say, well, how do you do that? Duke just beat them on a neutral court. Yes, agreed. But again, I think Michigan still, they had a horrible shooting day too. They had a horrible shooting day, and they haven't been like that most of the season. I would not put Arizona behind Duke and Michigan. I wouldn't put them a tier below.
Sure.
I would say the 3 of them, you can kind of throw in. I just have never bought in all year to the fact that there's been a dominant team. I don't remember. We're in the chat. I think we're in this chat with a bunch of other knuckleheads in the sport and covering the sport. And I think I got yelled at for saying it like 2 weeks ago when I said, like, there's really not much disparity to me. I don't think there's a dominant team. And everybody's like, oh, you idiot. Look at Michigan. And then they beat Purdue at Purdue. But that's a horrible matchup for Michigan. Purdue does not match up well with Michigan at all. I just don't think there's that dominant team. I think you can throw maybe 7 teams in a hat and say, like, I just don't. I think it's matchup dependent. I think it's health dependent. We're seeing it now. Some teams get knocked out because of health. Not the top tier teams. I mean, Cole Pete will be back, but obviously we see JT Toppin, and I'm not sure Texas Tech was never in that tier anyway. Richie Saunders, BYU, they were never in that tier anyway. But the top 6 or 7, I think, Evan, I don't know if you agree. Like, I don't think there's that big a difference. I don't think it's like, yes, Michigan fears, I think most coaches that I talk to say, like, that's the one team I don't want to run into in the tournament because, again, those bigs, man, and the fact that they have so much depth and, like, quality depth. Not just depth, but, like, dudes who can, you look at McKinney and Kaysen coming off the bench, and they got, Gale, and, like, they got some really good players coming off the bench. Even Cheddar, like Will Cheddar can come off the bench. He's been there for like 10 years. So, yeah, I think Michigan's maybe a little bit better, a little bit scarier for teams.
Yeah, I will touch on this later in the show, but I do think both these things are true. I think Michigan and to a certain extent Duke have maybe pushed themselves a little bit ahead of those other teams, but I also equally think there are still 6 to 7 teams that are very firmly in the title favorites tier, and I don't think it's Michigan or Duke's to lose, if that makes sense. Okay, so one last game I want to touch on here quickly, staying in the Big 12. Complete shocker, Cincinnati goes on the road against Kansas and wins by 16 points. Darryn Peterson, hey guys, he played, but he didn't play that well for his standards. 32 minutes, but just 17 points, 1 of 7 from 3. Not a lot else going on. I feel like other than Flory Badunga, no one else really in Kansas had a good game. And Cincinnati is like low-key really hot right now, which is kind of coming out of nowhere, maybe a bit too late. We'll get to the Cincy thing in just a second, but where does this loss put things for you in terms of Kansas? Because this team is all over the place, and I think fans are rightfully fed up with what is the true identity of this team around Darryn Peterson and how is this going to work?
Yeah, I've pushed back. Rob Dosser said for weeks, like, he thinks Kansas is a team that can win 6 straight. And I'm like, there's no way in hell they can win 6 straight. Like, they can't even get this dude out there for 4 straight, number one. Like, wait till they do that. And they looked lost with him, and he looked like a shell of himself in that last game. I mean, he just stands in the corner most of the game. Now, I saw him play in person against Iowa State a week ago, and he couldn't get by anybody. He does not look like the same player now that he looked like, even a few weeks ago at times. Now, he hasn't been able to obviously sustain it. We know that. But we've seen bursts where I'm like, that's the same player who I ranked number 1 a couple of years ago when everybody was saying it was AJ. Like, this kid has burst, and I don't know. I mean, I tried to talk around this the other night on After Dark, and it's really hard for me. Here's what I'll say. I don't blame the kid for all this. I do not blame Darryn Peterson. I know a lot of people do, and they're taking shots at him. I will say this. If he wanted to shut it down, could have shut it down 6 weeks ago, a month ago, and been the number 1 pick. He's out there playing. I think it's his camp. I think it's his camp that's the issue right now, and I think it's his camp that's been the issue for a while now. Not getting this thing kind of, I don't want to say fixed, but just kind of figuring this thing out with the cramps and what's going on. I think now it's a mental thing. I do. I think a big part of it now isn't just physical. It's, hey, when this comes on, he can't work through it. He can't figure out a way to work through it. And I think almost like last game, you watch him, Evan, you're like, just standing there. Is he protecting himself? Is Bill self-protecting him by just saying, hey, stand in the corner. We want to get you through the full game. When they get you the ball, okay, you can make a move, but we don't really. And even like he's jogging around for the most part. Like I don't think I saw him sprint the whole game on offense or defense. So I wish I knew exactly what to make of this situation. I think I have a decent feel on it. Some things can be said, some things can't. But I will say this, like, I'm not taking a shot at this kid. I know people will, and it's a little bit shocking to me that if you had told me Darryn Peterson 2 years ago would be in this situation and people would be questioning his mental and physical toughness, I would have said no way in hell after watching him. No way. I mean, the kid I thought he was a killer on the AAU circuit. So this really surprises me, but I think there's more than meets the eye, and I don't think it's like load management or protecting his draft stock. I think a lot of it right now is up here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's disappointing. We want a healthy Darryn Peterson. For Kansas in general, we just want some stability. Like we need some we need to know what's happening, and we need to know what you can count on and what you can't. And I think they really need that desperately. This was a great win for Cincinnati, though. They're maybe a little bit too little too late here, but they're 15-12. They've won 4 straight games. Do they have a shot at making the tournament? I feel like they've got 4 games before the Big 12 tournament at Texas Tech versus Oklahoma State versus BYU at TCU. I think based on looking at their resume metrics, they probably have to go 3-1 to even have a pulse entering the Big 12 tournament. This has been a turnaround, though. I mean, their resume is barely a top 70 resume in the sport, but right now, based on their form, I have them as the 36th best team in the country. That's a big gap. Do you think Wes Miller can get this group at least in the conversation on Selection Sunday?
I mean, here's the question I have to you, and we went through this exercise a little bit there of like, all right, this Texas Tech team, if they beat them without JT Toppin, how much are you giving them for that? How much are you giving them for that? Like, you said it. You said they went from like a top 12-ish team for you to now like the 40th best.
That's correct.
Team
Yep.
for you.
In terms of adjusting for the JT Toppin injury. Yeah.
I listen to you occasionally. So yeah, I mean, they probably, if they can run this thing and win all 4 and win a game in the Big 12 tournament, yeah, they probably get to the, again, everybody always said, I got it from like 2 coaches yesterday. What do we have to do, Al? What do we have to do? You went to the mock select. I'm like, dude, don't give me that much credit, first of all. Number 2, nobody knows. Like, I could tell you all I want. Like, I mean, I could just say win out, right? Win out to the couple coaches that hit me. But, like, we don't know what everybody else is going to do. So you can't just say, like, well, if Wes Miller goes, they win all 4, and they win a game in the Big 12 tournament, they're in. We don't know what everybody else is on the bubble. What's New Mexico going to do? What are some of these other teams going to do? New Mexico could run the table themselves, and some of the other teams that are on the bubble. So I find it really hard to answer that question. I would say if you're Wes Miller and you're trying to keep your job, you probably need to finish very strong and maybe get in the NCAA tournament. And I give Wes a lot of credit. He stood up there a couple of weeks ago, and it probably did change a little bit of kind of how they've been. Like he said, it's on me. No excuses. It's on me. And I think players, when they hear that, probably say like, hey, you know what? We got to play a little bit harder for this dude. Like, he's taking the hit for us. No matter how much money we're making, no matter how much we're thinking of going in the portal in a few weeks, we got to play harder for this dude.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, before we get out of here, I want to touch briefly on what we did on Thursday. So for those who didn't see all of our tweets on Twitter earlier in the week, basically both Jeff and I had the opportunity with a bunch of other media members to participate in a mock selection committee exercise at NCAA headquarters in Indianapolis that was basically walking a bunch of national media members through the process of actually sitting in the shoes of committee members and what the process of initially picking the field looks like, getting seed lines, scrubbing, all of this different stuff. It was a very intense exercise. And you and I actually had the privilege, if you want to call it that, of being partners together. And it was harder because we actually had to agree on every decision that we were making. And it would be me looking at my spreadsheets and you being like, okay, well, this team stinks. And so we have to.
Yeah, I think I said that at the end. Didn't I say that to everybody?
Like, I think you that was your argument for the tournament not expanding, was all these teams stink.
And somebody pushed back. I forget who it was, but somebody pushed back.
Okay, so one of my biggest takeaways from this was, I think in our exercise on Thursday, they kind of gave us free reign to use whatever criteria that we had to decide. And it seemed more so that way than I was expecting. I was anticipating there being more guidelines of you should really prioritize this metric or that. And ultimately, and I think this is probably representative of the real committee, they're all educated and informed on all of these different tools that they have. But ultimately, there is not one way that you should select the tournament. And so, for example, we barely talked about a team's net ranking as a reason for them to be seated or in the field. It was more about resume average and predictive average. And I think even on Saturday in the top 16 reveal, Keith Gill, he only really mentioned the net in the context of here are the teams that Duke has beat in terms of their net ranking, but he never said, oh, the reason why we picked this team over that team was net ranking. It was more resume metrics and predictive metrics. Was that something that you noticed as well in terms of the net maybe not being as much of a needle mover for that as maybe we're expecting, or maybe that's something that you kind of figured would be the case?
I've talked to enough of the committee members over the years to understand they each have their own value that they place on what matters most, right? So, while we all want to look at a certain metric and say, like, that's the one, then for me, it's like the net, just because the NCAA came up with it. So I always kind of just assumed it would have a little bit more weight because it's the NCAA's, way of measuring the best teams. And that's not necessarily the case. And some people on that committee have told me straight out, they're like, hey, you know what? I watch a lot of games. If it's close, I'm going with the eye test. I'm going with the eye test if it's close. Because a lot of times it is, Evan, and it is on the bubble. Let's face it. Like, when we're trying to figure out those final teams, how hard is it?
It's difficult because they all stink, according to you.
Well, I would say this. I mean, again, no matter what you do, you go to 64, you go to 68, you go to 72, 76. We're always going to have complaints from whoever the next 4 or 8 teams are. So we're never going to get rid of that. But yeah, I mean, I thought the Miami University, that was the one. That was the hottest button topic that I think we faced. And it was interesting because your boy who you had on before me, Matt Norlander, who never shut up through the entire day, was on the pro, I don't care who Miami played or didn't play, they're undefeated. And I love Travis Steele, and I love the story. There's no bigger fan of the Cinderella story than me. I want him to get in the worst way, but I'm also realistic about this thing, and I pushed back, and I said, like, they played 3 non-D1s. They've played another half dozen teams that are basically 300 or below in Ken Palm in the net. They could have played somebody. And he put, no, they couldn't get anybody. I got a list of people that they couldn't play. And I'm like, dude, trust me, they could have played good mid-majors. Maybe highs, and I think they could have gotten a 2-for-1 with a high. I mean, again, Towson played multiple. They played St. Mary's in a high major this year. They played Kansas before. Purdue played Akron this year, I believe. Most of the Alabama, call Alabama, they'll play anybody. Right? We know that. They play plenty of mid-major plus teams. And Travis Steele also had the benefit of returning almost everybody from his team. So, I don't know, man. Like, it's a tough one for me. And again, I just want him to run the table, so it's not even a discussion. But I also look at that schedule, and I'm like, that schedule is awful.
Yeah, and I think both of these things can be true for Miami, Ohio. I think based on the fact that they're undefeated even against a poor schedule, I think they deserve to be in the field as of right now. I also think if they were in Dayton in a first 4 game against, say, Ohio State right now, if I actually pull up a hypothetical matchup preview at evanmiya.com between Miami and Ohio State would be favored by about 5 points, which is a pretty big margin for a game between 2 teams that are in Dayton.
I don't want them as a first 4. If they get in, put them as like an 11 or 12. Put them in the real field if they get in. Again, especially, we were talking, the hypothetical was if they lose a game and then lose in the MAC tournament to whoever, then what do you do with them? And right now they're down to what are there, 4 games left? I think 4 games. So hopefully it won't come to that. Hopefully they just win out at this point, win out at least in the regular season. And then I think if they have 1 loss, even in the tournament, they'll end up getting in the NCAA tournament. But that was to me, I'm trying to think of what else. I mean, the injury things were obviously interesting with JT.
We obviously talked about Texas Tech, but I think there was also an acknowledgement of this isn't going to matter as much to the committee because they're going to have a number of games at that point, in which case you just kind of take them for face value at that point.
That's right.
Yeah.
We just kind of we split. I think in the middle of like, all right, we're not going to drop them as far as 40th like you would, or like they say they're gonna. You say they may be. We're going to drop them to. I think we dropped them to 21.
And ultimately, the committee didn't hold that against them at all, at least in the top 16 reveal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which, no doubt.
Yeah. Well, I know we could keep chatting, but I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much for your time today, Goodman. Hopefully you feel a little bit more respected after.
Next year, I want to be number one.
Okay, that's good. I'll have you on in December when no one's listening. How about that?
I can come on twice.
Okay, I'll put you down for it.
Just put me on twice and just take Norlander right off the board.
Perfect. All right. It was great to get your analysis on what's going on. I really appreciate you joining me today.
Thanks, Evan. Appreciate it, man. Keep doing well.
Thank you to Jeff Goodman for joining me today. As I mentioned, we ended up spending a lot of last week together. We were both at the Purdue-Michigan game in West Lafayette on Tuesday, and then the mock selection exercise where we were basically chained together at a desk for 8 hours. But always great to spend time with him. He does great stuff at Field of 68. If you're not already tapped into Field of 68, and they're every night after dark coverage, and they're going to have a lot of stuff around NCAA tournament time as well for analysis. So be sure to check them out. A lot of their stuff you can find on YouTube and on Twitter and that sort of thing. And I just will also mention Jeff Goodman has been one of the big media members in the space who has really taken me under his wing, really going back several years ago, one of the earliest people to reach out to me and say that he appreciated what I was doing and was trying to offer any support in any way that he could. So he's been a big part of, kind of my growth and gaining credibility in this industry. So I'm really thankful to him for that. So thank you to Jeff for joining me on the show today. It was awesome to have you. Well, guys, there's a lot more to get to from the weekend as we get ever closer to March, and I am thrilled to have on Will Warren from Basket Under Review to dig into some more of these results. Will, we got to get to what I think was arguably the most exciting game of the weekend, certainly the best ending. UCLA beats Illinois in overtime on a buzzer-beating layup by Donovan Dent. Final score, UCLA 95, Illinois 94. This was kind of a late-night game on Saturday. This was not the expected outcome for this game if you were watching early in the first half. Illinois was up 33-10 after a first-half avalanche, which is what we call a 20-0 run. And just for the sake of context here, teams this season who have had a 20-0 run in a game are 60-6 until this game. So there's basically less than a 10% win rate for teams that were on the other end of this. And that's what UCLA was able to overcome in this game. They ended up tying it with 15 minutes to go in the second half. It was very much back and forth after that. At the end of regulation, Donovan Dent had a chance to win this at the buzzer with a step back three. Did not happen. So then we go into overtime, and UCLA is up 1 with 16 seconds left. Keaton Wagler drives into the paint, kicks it to Ben Humrickhouse for 3. He misses the 3, but Wagler tips in the miss with 4.9 seconds. And then once we get out of the timeout, Donovan Dent takes it the length of the court, a whirling layup released with a half second left. The buzzer sounds, UCLA wins, storms the court. This game was the absolute goods on Saturday. What were your thoughts, Will, on this thriller between UCLA and Illinois?
You think mid-avalanche, Mick was thinking about what he might say in the presser? You think he was looking at the roster, he was like, Xavier Booker, we haven't kicked him down here in a while. It was great for UCLA. I think they had to have this to get into the tournament.
Yes.
So they're up, I want to say, north of 40 in WAB at the moment. So they're ahead of the pack, which is good for them. And that would be, for me, a shame to not have Donovan Dent in the NCAA tournament. I know it's not been his best season, but he's come on a little bit more as of late. Obviously, had a giant bucket here. And frankly, after the weird career he's had, I wouldn't mind seeing Sky Clark get a little bit of March shine. I think it could be really useful for him to end on a good note. But this is a great game, great finish. I definitely mentally tuned this out at 33-10, or I think when I first saw the score, it was 27-8 or something like that. And I was like, well, I won't be turning that on. And then our friend Andrew Weatherman, his site CBB Data, the scoreboard, I checked. I don't know what else I was watching, but I checked like midway through the second half. I was like, how is UCLA leading this game? That doesn't sound right. So I turned it on, made sure his score bug wasn't messed up, and it was all good. But this is great for UCLA. This has exposed my last real remaining concern about the Illini. Yeah, they have an amazing offense. Number one in America to me. I don't think anybody's touching it this year. Yes, if they're hitting threes to go along with a huge rebounding edge they create on a nightly basis, they're really hard to defeat. But I can't stop feeling some concern about a defense that ranks dead last in turnovers forced. That is, as a guy who thinks a lot about shot volume and, what is your plan when shots do or don't fall, that does kind of give your opponent like a fallback option. You know that you're not going to pressure the ball and you know that you're not going to force many turnovers. So they're going to get off shots, and Illinois does protect the defensive boards exceptionally well. But that, along with some interior defensive issues that have started to crop up a little bit, like in the 6 losses this year, opponents have shot 50% or higher from 2 and 4 of them. They're 6-4 when allowing 50% or worse from 2. The culprits of the losses are all pretty similar to me. Good shooting offenses that don't turn it over and can score from inside and out. I know that's a little easier said than done in a way, but I mean, if it was interesting to watch UCLA in this game because I do wonder if game script affected this a little bit. 28 threes feels really high for any UCLA team, and overtime affected that a bit too. But the game script maybe lent its hand a little bit to that, but I just keep staring at the box score that tells me 5 turnovers in 45 minutes of play. And while this UCLA offense is not terrible by any stretch, and one of their best features is not turning it over, that was still, I think, their second lowest turnover rate of the entire season. And this is against, top, by all accounts, top 6 team. And I just kind of wonder a little bit, like, is this going to be what eventually takes Illinois down?
Yeah, I think stylistically, Illinois and UCLA almost made this game play out in ways that both these teams don't typically play.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, Illinois out-rebounded UCLA in this game by 16 and still lost the game. Illinois also attempted a season high. They shoot a lot of threes. They attempted 42 in this game. And in their next 3 highest attempt games this year, where they've taken a large amount of threes, they've all made 38% of them or better. So basically in games where they've really cranked up the volume on their 3-point attempts, it's because they've been going in. In this game, they only shot 31%. If you're going to shoot around 30% and take 42 of them, it's impressive that this game was close if you're taking that into account. But this was the most threes allowed in terms of attempts by UCLA in the last 5 years. So Illinois went and said, we have a game plan, and this is something different that UCLA has normally seen, and UCLA still won this game. So I find that to be very impressive. And like you mentioned, a very much needed win for UCLA. This moves them off of the bubble gray area, I think, for me. And right now they sit at 18-9, 10-6 in the Big Ten. I have them in terms of their predictive team rating as 39th in the country at evanmiya.com. Obviously, the talent is there. I think if they get in March, this is a very interesting team to talk about in terms of their bracket outlook. But this was huge for them. I'm curious on the Illinois side of things here. Kylan Boswell has been back for 3 games, and this has been a conversation while he was out. It was what allowed Keaton Wagler to really become the force that he has been this year. And the question was always, okay, they want Boswell back, but how is it going to work with him back? Because Keaton Wagler was so ball dominant when he played, but Boswell is the more traditional point guard. So in these 3 games back, I think Boswell has played well, but Wagler has scored 18 points, 10 points, 19 points in those games. He's made just 2 threes collectively across those games. You would hope that even if his scoring volume is down, his efficiency stays up. That's not been the case. How do you think Illinois can get the best out of those 2 players down the stretch? Because they're going to need them both to play well.
I wonder if you have to stagger the lineups a little bit because like you mentioned, Wagler's usage rate falls off a cliff when they share the court. It goes from 29% when Boswell's off to 23% when they're both out there together. And Boswell's usage rate actually falls too, down to 21 from 24. I do think there's just some stylistic overlap in the way they both hunt their shots, and the style of shots that they both get are a little different when one or the other is off the floor. So it's hard to look at it and be like, hey, I think it'd be great if you didn't play your two best players together, but it's creating an interesting thing where the two best players do functionally do, while not being the exact same player, a lot of the exact same things. So that's a tough one for Brad to figure out. It is a good thing that you have this problem where you have two great players and you got to kind of figure out how to play them off of one another. But I would say that like when they play together, Illinois is just as good, if not better, efficiency-wise on both ends of the court. And they do have a higher rim rate, which will help them. I think, with the styles of shots they take, so many long threes and such a wide and tall roster, they're going to get a lot of offensive rebounds back pretty much every game. But that level of, spreading out the court and being able to attack the rim with those two out there, it's kind of like the old Warriors death lineup a little bit. That can get you out of a jam when you need to. And I can see a scenario here where like, we get to the Sweet 16 and Illinois is down by 3 or something with 8 minutes left. And it's like, all right, we're going to ride Boswell and Wagler together for the next 8 minutes and see what happens. And, either or both can go off in that scenario.
Another big result for a home team that was an underdog over the weekend was BYU getting a much needed home win against Iowa State. I think even before the Richie Saunders injury, I was kind of penciling this game as saying BYU has not beaten any elite teams this year. They've had a lot of opportunities, but they've come up short. In order to really bolster their resume, they need this one. And then Richie Saunders gets hurt, and all of a sudden, this becomes a still very gettable game, but not a gimme by any means against a very good Iowa State team that going into this game was on the 1 seed line, according to the selection committee in their top 16 reveal on Saturday. But BYU pretty much led this for the entire game. AJ DeBonsa, a lot of the success for them is going to come from ultimately just giving him the keys and letting him do his thing, because there is one less star player to sort of take the pressure off of him. And he finishes with maybe his best all-around game he's had. I know he's had some bigger scoring outputs, but against a very good Iowa State team, he finishes with 29 points, 10 rebounds, 9 assists, so almost a triple-double there. And like Rob Wright, his other co-star, if you will, was underneath his usual level, just 6 points, 4 assists, no threes in this game. But they got other pieces to step up, which has not been a given for them a lot this season. Mihailo Boskovic had 13 points. That was big for him. And on the defensive side of things, they really limited Iowa State's weapons. Milan Momcilovic, the best three-pointer in the country, only had 1 made basket in this entire game. He averages about 17 and a half per game. And so that was big for them. And BYU, again, not the same outlook for them without Richie Saunders. I think their chances of a Final Four are pretty much gone. But they're going to be somewhere in that 5 to 7 seed range, most likely when we get to Selection Sunday. They're going to be a team that no one's going to want to face. I know that's a very cliche, but when you're talking about a guy who could maybe be the future best player in the NBA potentially, and AJ DeBonsa, in the conversation for number 1 pick, that actually is true. So this was a big result for them. Do you think that this is something that they can continue even without Richie Saunders going forward?
Yeah, but not every night. I think that they could pop off a win here or there like this. The thing for me with AJ, so the usage already this year is at 38% with no Saunders on the court. It filtered only for top 100 opponents. It's 40, which is insane. I mean, Rob Wright also is at 26%. So when those two are on the court, that's 2/3 of your possessions being used by just 2 guys. The other 3 are kind of just there to, moral support, basically, spacing, occasionally hitting a 3. I don't know how sustainable that is, but it is fun. It's an entertaining watch. It's an experience that we don't often get at the high major level. And I did want to note, we were a point and an assist away from AJ being the first person to do 30, 10, and 10 twice in a season since Oscar Robertson.
Ow.
Oscar Robertson in 1960, which would have been a pretty historic day. I don't know that he'll ever be as good as Oscar Robertson was, but when you're in that territory of like talking about that name in a game, then you're clearly doing something right. They are in a really interesting spot to me going forward based on their schedule, where this is like the last marquee opponent. Texas Tech on senior day is going to matter, but your next 3, UCF, WVU, Cincinnati, weirdly enough, 2 of those 3 teams could be playing their way into the tournament. West Virginia probably dead on the at-large bubble, but we don't know. Everybody's going to have something to play for, which makes all of these games interesting. And I will say really quick on the Iowa State side, I don't feel too much concern about this. Really hard spot on the road. BYU needed it. Coming off of Kansas, Houston back-to-back. The question of what does Iowa State bring defensively this year when they don't force turnovers does loom a little bit, because they're now 4-3 when the opponent turns it over in 18% or fewer possessions. Opponent offenses that take good care of the ball generally seem to have more success. More patient offenses, if you will. But I don't know. I still like this team just fine. There's always like the desire to be reactionary. I think we're going to see that, however Houston goes later tonight. We'll see how that shakes out. But no, I think Iowa State's fine, and BYU's, like you said, Final Four, probably not, but like second weekend, sure.
Yeah, and I think this win probably moves BYU up a seed line when we get to Selection Sunday, compared to if they didn't have that really one marquee win that they were chasing. And on Iowa State, I agree with you. This stretch that they had against Kansas, Houston, BYU, going 2-1 in that stretch, you take that, because the BYU is loaded, and there's no way you're winning all of those games. So, I'm not really worried about Iowa State in that sense. And they still have as good a trio as, a lot of it was who has the better trio in the Big 12, and now BYU is down a star, so it's really Iowa State there, and so that's a really fun ingredient for them. Okay, moving on to the SEC, Tennessee got a really big road win against Vanderbilt, 69-65, and just kind of big picture for Tennessee before we get into this game. I think this win possibly moves Tennessee from the 5 to the 4 line. At least that's how I have it according to resume quality at EvanMiya.com. And one of the things I like about Tennessee is they have some sneaky good wins. Their win against Houston on a neutral in the Players Era Festival has aged wonderfully for them. But road wins again in the SEC against Vanderbilt, Alabama, and Georgia are all very impressive to have on your resume. I think that stacks up really well for them. I admittedly did not get to watch a ton of this game. There were some other things going on, but I know that you were really glued in on this one. So what did you take away from this win for Tennessee over Vanderbilt?
Tennessee's path this year is not pretty, but the way they own the boards is really remarkable to watch on a game-by-game basis. So I'm looking at Torvik right now. 9 straight opponents held under 30% rebound rate on offense. And over the last 8 games, 6 times Tennessee's rebounded 45% or more of their missed shots. That is going to get you some places in March. It doesn't. And to go with that, Tennessee quietly has not stopped, but slowed their turnovers on offense. Last 4 games, admittedly, 3 of these against what we'll call politely bad defenses. 15.7, 15.4, 10.6, 14.2% turnover rates offensively. Considering I sat and watched Tennessee turn it over on a quarter of possessions against Syracuse 2 months ago, this does represent real growth. So I think we're seeing them kind of build into something better. Nate Ament has obviously started to really blossom for them. The biggest takeaway for me was Tennessee winning that game without JP Estrella, who has really graduated into their best big by my eyes. And despite, having some up and down play from the other posts, like Jalen Carey was not great. He did enough, but he wasn't great. Okpara was okay. Tennessee it's a very flawed team, but a flawed one that's very interesting. Seems built to be fairly safe from an upset, I would say, in the round of 64, and which makes them really interesting as a value play on from that. So I am always curious to hear people's thoughts who, perhaps don't live in the same town as the university on this team.
Yeah, I think I will touch on the whole turnover and offensive rebound thing. That was a very interesting point you made. And on the keys to victory tool at evanmiya.com, I just pulled up Tennessee over their last 5 years based on how they've played according to it, their offensive rebound percentage and their turnover percentage in games. And it's a very interesting split here. The tool identifies that their target should be in games to have an offensive rebound percentage above 37% and a turnover percentage below 14. And in games where they hit both of those marks, in the last 5 years under Rick Barnes, they are 23-0, winning games by about 22 points. And it's a much worse percentage or win percentage and margin and all that if they don't hit those. And specifically, they've hit both of those marks, 37% on the offensive glass, turnover percentage under 14%. They've hit that 5 times this year for both of those, and they're 5-0 in those games. So I do think that is a trend to watch for them going forward of, can you get on the glass offensively? Can you limit turnovers? That has been a key for them. They've hit that in their 3 last games against Vanderbilt, Oklahoma, and LSU, have won all of those games. So I really like that. And I think in terms of their tournament outlook, from a neutral perspective, I do think that they are one of those like ho-hum, boring, but solid teams, who they're not going to be a sexy pick to go to an Elite Eight. But you can't overlook them. I think they're absolutely in that Final Four potential tier with other teams that are maybe more interesting to watch, like Nebraska or even Vanderbilt is a team that, will be talked about more as a potential fun team to pick. But Tennessee's right in the mix there. And, typical Rick Barnes, slow team, better defensively than offensively, can be a bit of a grind in terms of getting buckets on the offensive end, but really solid. And so, yeah, I think people will be remiss not to consider them as a potential team to go further in this tournament when we're looking at the brackets compared to some of these other maybe more flashy names that we would see right now.
I would agree. I think you're selling them as a redneck San Diego State, which I don't mind. Quick note on the remaining schedule, because you mentioned the potential rise to the 4 seed. I've seen some split opinions on that. At Missouri, home Bama, at Missouri, home Bama, road South Carolina, home Vandy. We'll be favored in all 4. The odds of going 4-0, 30-ish%, I'll guess without looking. But the intriguing thing that I brought up the rebounding point for, 3 of those 4, Bama, Vanderbilt, South Carolina, among the 4 worst offensive rebounding teams in the league. So Tennessee could really run up the score in the front court and just in general on the boards in those games. And that creates, like a potential hard thing to overcome for those teams. Missouri being the best rebounding team of these 4 perhaps tells you the struggles of these 4 teams down low.
Yeah. Okay, I want to close by having us both pick. Right now, we are a little over a month out from when we will actually have the Final Four in early April. So I want us to pick right now. I feel like this is the latest in the calendar year that we can pick our Final Four before we actually get a bracket. So I'm going to have us both pick who would be our Final Four picks. Obviously, we don't know how the regions are going to shake out, and some of these matchups will make this, impossible, if you will. But right now, the whole board is on the table. So I'm going to ask you right now, who would be your Final Four teams? And then I will go ahead and share who I'm going with right now for the Final Four.
I'm doing my whole nerd idiot logic thing that I always do where, at Basque Under Review, we've explored what the tournament might look like this year. I think it's kind of like a 2017 region, maybe 2015, where probably dominated by 1 seeds, but only 2 of them make the Final Four. Probably a 2 or 3 sit in there, and then a weird team. There's always we're missing the wonk team from last year. So my Final Four, I've got Michigan, Duke. I'm going to assume Houston's probably going to end up a 2. Maybe I do want Kansas to beat them. Maybe they'll give me a little bracket value. Houston is my 3rd. And then the left field team, I just feel like they're weirdly off the radar, and they shouldn't be, because they're going to be a 6 seed or so, is Louisville.
Interesting.
I don't feel like I'm hearing anybody discuss Louisville, and I'm aware about the Pat Kelsey thing with top 25 competition, but frankly, that's only a narrative until it's not.
Yeah, that's a very interesting pick. I feel like Louisville has the talent and the guards to do that. I think we've seen that at flashes this year. I would really struggle to pick Louisville as a Final Four team. You mentioned the whole top 25 narrative. I think that's a real thing. If you look on the team ratings page at evanmiya.com and you sort by opponent strength adjustment, which basically looks at on the course of the year, how do teams play up or down to competition? Louisville is the 3rd worst in the country at basically playing better basketball against the elite teams on their schedule. And typically at this point in a year, we have enough data where this is a predictive factor that goes into a team's performance. So what that means to me is Louisville's probably a fairly safe pick to get past their first game, maybe their second. But if we're talking about them being able to pull an upset against a top 5 or a top 10 team, there just hasn't been a lot of evidence this year to suggest that that's in the cards. So for me, that's a reason why I couldn't pull the trigger there, but I can see the enticing logic for that. So I don't mind the pick there. For me, I think I'm going a little bit more chalky at this stage. I think Michigan and Duke are shoo-ins for me. And then I'm kind of picking remaining 2 from Arizona, Florida, Houston, Illinois, and Purdue probably. Once we get the bracket, I think I might feel a little bit more comfortable picking a team outside of that group to, be a wild card pick based on regions and that sort of thing. I just don't know who that team is right now. So I'm going to pick my remaining 2 from that group. Arizona's floor feels as high to me as anybody in terms of their defense, in terms of their never taking a night off. And, Tommy Lloyd has admittedly struggled to get this group as far in the tournament as they maybe should have in recent years. I think right now they would break that streak, if you will. They're one of the most consistent teams from night in, night out on my site. So I'm picking Arizona, and I feel like it's a really tough call for me right now for that 4th Final Four spot between Houston and Illinois. I think coming into the weekend, I would have picked Houston. I still have Houston rated a touch higher than Illinois, but I think stylistically, I think I can just see it a little bit more with Illinois. And I know that they lost over the weekend as well, but at their best, their level feels really high to me in terms of having a lottery pick on your roster in Keaton Wagler, but then also having a bunch of guys who are big, long, athletic, and can shoot the 3 ball. I feel like Illinois can impose their will more in terms of what they want to do more on most teams than a lot of other teams in this group can. And they don't seem to me to have maybe as many weaknesses as a team like Florida or Purdue has shown at times this year. So I think I'm picking Illinois as my final pick there. So it would be Michigan, Duke, Arizona, and Illinois. What are your thoughts there?
I like those picks. Very chalky, but that could be the way this tournament goes. I mean,
yeah.
It wouldn't really shock me. 2 things here. One, just for the total insanity of the styles clash, Arizona, Illinois would be my preferred 1 and 2 matchup out of any in the entire field. Number 2, I did just have a thought. If I were to replace Louisville, because I think this is the greatest time in world history to pull a little buy low here, and I love a buy low, Vanderbilt. And they don't have that little annoying blue tag that tells me this team sucks against top 25 competition.
Yeah, I like Vanderbilt, and I think I've wanted them in my heart to be a Final Four team all year. So it would be amazing if they could get there.
I'm gonna note real quick. Living here, it would not be amazing, but
okay, that is fair.
Objectively, it would be pretty cool.
Yes. Well, we don't care about your personal experience on this podcast. So. Okay, I do want to quickly ask you on a more somber note about the passing of Wes Rucker. For those who are unfamiliar, Wes Rucker was a long time, sort of storied blogger, journalist, and media presence in the greater Tennessee community. And I personally have never met Wes face to face, but have messaged with him several times on Twitter and know him to be a great guy. And a lot of stuff has come out since his surprising passing last week, just about some of the way that he carried himself and his values and things like that. I know you had a bit more of a closer, you're more closely in his circles. So just any thoughts on him and sort of how you've even, just processed the last several days as we lost a really special one in the college basketball community?
Yeah, man, it's been tough. I won't lie. It was hard watching the Tennessee Vanderbilt game on Saturday, knowing like how much he would have wanted to be there. I can't recall if you're older or younger than me. We'll never find out. It doesn't matter. But when I first signed up for Twitter in 2009, he was basically the only journalist covering Tennessee sports that was on the site. And so that was like, he was the early adopter of social media before people were really aware of what it was. And so that was how I learned about him. And, over the years, like starting out doing my own thing, there's like a collective of guys here that are very encouraging to young journalists and will, answer young questions, like Grant Ramey, Mike Wilson, guys like that. And Wes was certainly in that group. Really, really good dude. And it's going to be tough going the rest of the way without him. But I feel that, to steal some terminology from our friends at I in college basketball, we've seen the best of us over the last few days. The GoFundMe for his family is, when I last checked, over $700,000, which is astonishing to me. I mean, they will be taken care of very well. There's a meal train that's planned out through the end of May. And I do suggest, one, that people look this all up, and two, if you are the praying kind, I do suggest praying for his family. Rick Barnes did bring this up in the post-game presser. If you're not the praying kind, keep them in your thoughts. It's a tough time for them, but as I mentioned, I do feel that we've seen the best of humanity in the last few days, sadly because of this.
Yeah, I think for me, when something like this happens, especially feeling this close to home, if you will, in our community, it just makes me cherish life. And I know that this is a college basketball podcast and all that, but this is real life, folks. And, nothing in life is a given. We're not owed anything. I don't have any right to live to age 80. And if I get there, it is a gift from God. And so it just makes me all the more just be grateful for our time on earth and thankful for people like Wes who, lived his life in a way that was really honorable and putting others first and battling through adversity with him and his family. And so it just makes me thankful to be here and thankful to, want to cherish the people around me, friends and family and that sort of thing. And like you said, yeah, be praying for Wes and his family and everyone impacted by this, because this can come out of left field and be really, really difficult. There are no ways to put words on going through this. And, I know the way that I've dealt with this and the way that you're even more closer. Imagine the people who are in his life every day. This is really tough, but there can be good that can come from this, and just being thankful to the Lord for it. So, well, yeah. I just really appreciate your thoughts on that. And it was great timing to have you on today, just because I wanted to say something. I felt remiss not to mention something about it, but you knew him even better than I did.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on to chat about him, and just for having me on in general. This was a lot of fun. You've already been roped into are you going to be in Indy in 6 weeks or whatever? 5 weeks? What is it? 5 weeks?
Yep.
Well, so I already told Isaac Trotter you're running with us. So
great.
Bring the running shoes.
So the only problem with that is I had ACL surgery in July. So
perfect. You can ride, they have bike share there.
That's true.
You can coach us.
I can run at this point. I'm able to run fairly well, but I have to be a little bit. I won't be quite up for the media pickup game this year, which I was a blast last year. Though I may still show up to that with a whistle and draw up some plays just for the
I like that. So. That would be good. You can throw tomatoes at Isaac and I.
Yes, exactly. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I always love getting your insight on what's going on in college basketball. It was a blast having you on. So yeah, just thanks for joining me.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you to Will Warren for joining me today. Will does fantastic work over at Basket Under Review with a lot of other great writers over there who are doing good stuff. And Will mentioned this, but he does a great job every year of basically identifying the trends in college basketball and predicting what impact that's going to have on the tournament. Last year in, maybe January, he kind of perfectly nailed that this was going to be a very chalky tournament, a lot of 1 seeds, and that's exactly how it turned out. So he's got a really good pulse on that sort of thing. Be sure to go check his stuff over there. And Basket Under Review is going to have a lot of written content for conference previews coming up on the site. That's just around the corner. So definitely go check that out over at Basket Under Review, along with all of his other stuff. All right, a few other games that I want to give some light to on today's show that we haven't had a chance to talk about yet. In the Big East, big showdown between UConn and Villanova. UConn going on the road against Villanova, coming off of a week where they lost to Creighton at home. Really needed this one, and they ended up getting it. UConn wins 73-63. Very balanced scoring night for UConn overall. 6 players had between 8 and 12 points in this game. And just overall, a good performance across the board. UConn shot 55% from the field and out-rebounded Villanova by 13 in this game. Maybe the one problem with this performance for UConn was Silas Demery had 7 turnovers, which is something he has shown in some of their bigger games this year. I think he had maybe 9 in the St. John's loss recently. So that is going to be something that opponents are continuing to exploit, but hopefully something they can get cleaned up. In terms of the top 4 teams in the sport, of teams that deserve to get 1 seeds, I think UConn with this win, along with some of the slip-ups from some of the other teams in the sport over the weekend, I think UConn is safely in the top 4 at this point with Michigan, Duke, and Arizona in terms of their resume. And there's some clear separation between them and the next crop of teams, which would be like Purdue, Alabama, and Houston. So I think this was a back on track road win for UConn and gives them a chance to hold on to that 1 seed for Selection Sunday. So that was a good result for them. Another result in the ACC, Virginia holds on to beat Miami 86-83 at home. Virginia continues to kind of lurk around in this Final Four potential type tier. Right now I have them 17th in the country, which I think is kind of good enough to say if they get hot, they can make a Final Four. So this was a good win for them. Miami, this would have been a great win for them to get on the road. Ultimately, though, I still think they are safely in the field as a 9 or 10 seed. Miami plays at Florida State on Tuesday. You absolutely cannot afford to lose that one if you are the Canes and trying to stay on the right side of the bubble. So a good result for Virginia. Miami comes close, but ultimately going to need a little bit more work there. St. Louis had a very interesting week. They lost to Rhode Island on Tuesday, and then I think this was on Friday. They beat VCU at home 88-75, and they were down early in this game. 22-8 was the lead for VCU early. St. Louis ends up clawing their way back, a 21-2 run in the second half, which included a kill shot. They are let me double check to make sure this is right. Yes, they are the leaders in kill shots this season. They're tied for the most at 35, and they have the most per game in the country at 1.35 per game. So more often than not, St. Louis is getting at least one 10-0 run in a game, if not multiple. That was a key ingredient to them getting this win against VCU. In watching this game, I was very impressed with Kellen Thames, who really turned this game around with his defensive intensity. The broadcasters were really praising his athleticism, and that was huge in this game. He ended up having 5 steals in this game, and a lot of them came in that 21-2 run, some breakaway steals that really pushed the momentum forward for St. Louis. He had 16 points off the bench in just 17 minutes, so that is a key ingredient for St. Louis, and I would hope that he continues to get some light on him as we get towards March Madness, because I think people are really going to love his game. Last one I'll mention here, we touched on this a little bit earlier with Jeff Goodman, but Miami, Ohio is still undefeated. They won over the weekend against Bowling Green. They are 27-0, 14-0 in the MAC. They have been working their way up the whole season in terms of their predictive team efficiency at EvanMiya.com. They are now 69th in the country, but that is still not even the best rated team in their conference. Akron is rated 63rd in the country at EvanMiya.com. And right now, if those two teams played on a neutral court, Akron would probably be favored by about a half point. So if they were to meet in the title game of the MAC, Akron would still probably be the odds-on favorite to win that game. But Miami's certainly still trending in the right direction. They are 5-0 this season in one-possession games, which is mind-bogglingly crazy good. You would hope that doesn't reverse course against them over the next couple games. They have 6 players, Miami does, averaging between 10.5 and 15 points per game. So you love that they are not star dominant. They're very balanced there. In terms of their outlook going forward, I think a lot of people listening to this would love for Miami to just get to March Madness undefeated or win their conference tournament, no doubt about it. But here's the reality of the situation. The probability that they get to their conference tournament with 0 losses right now is only 38%. So it is more likely than not that before they even get to their conference tournament, they will take 1 loss. If they were to then lose in the MAC tournament, and that depends on who they lose to, how far they get to, that becomes a very interesting conversation about a 2-loss at-large situation there. Right now, they deserve to be in the field. A team that would be about at-large strength in terms of just getting in the field would be expected to have 1.3 losses against their schedule, and Miami has 0 losses. So they should get a lot of credit for that. But if that turns into 2 losses by the time we get to Selection Sunday, this becomes a much more dicey conversation for them. But you have to give credit to them for even just getting to this point. A lot of people talk about Miami, Ohio, and maybe we'd even say they've sort of rigged the system by playing all those bad teams and being undefeated to this point. The reality is there is no way that Miami, Ohio could have possibly expected for this to work like this. Based on how good they were coming into the season, which was a very good team with a lot of key returning players, the probability against their schedule that they would be undefeated right now at this point in time is 0.09%, or 1 out of 1,134. So if you were to play the season over 1,000 times, only 1 out of those 1,000 times, give or take, would on average result in them being undefeated at this point. There is no possible way that you can plan on replicating this if you're another mid-major in this kind of same tier. What they have done is incredible, and they should be given a lot of credit for that. And this is not just them gaming the system. Yes, their schedule has been poor, but they should not be undefeated at this point, and they are. So they should get a lot of kudos for that. Right now, I think they're probably a 10 seed. If it's seeded right now, if they have one loss, that would be probably more last four in territory, but ultimately, that's kind of what we're talking about here. So I think if they can get all the way to the conference tournament undefeated and then take a loss, I think they're in. If they have one loss going in and then they lose again in their tournament and have two losses, it gets pretty dicey. I really hope they can pull this off, guys, because this is one of the best stories in America. So just wanted to give a little bit more light to that there. All right, it is time for this week's Analytics Corner. This is the section of the show where I share some things that are more analytically driven, more statistical in nature, often from EvanMiya.com. I've got two things for you today. First, we're going to talk about briefly some of the updated injury outlooks for teams that have lost a star player to injury for the season or out for a while. Specifically Texas Tech, BYU, and North Carolina. So if you are unfamiliar, at EvanMiya.com, I adjust for injuries based on predicting how good a team will be without a player if they're out for a certain period of time or for the rest of the season. You can see this reflected both on the team ratings page in terms of their injury rank, which you can see as a column, or you can actually select account for current injuries and resort the table that way. You can also see it on any matchup preview, which will preview any upcoming game or hypothetically any matchup between two teams. And it will show you the injury report. It will show you exactly what a team's ranking is with and without their players and how much the actual point spread is adjusted for those injuries. So BYU lost Richie Saunders for this season. This was a little bit over a week ago now. Devastating injury. We've talked about it some already. At the time of the injury, BYU was ranked 22nd in my predictive team ratings at EvanMiya.com. The Richie Saunders injury dropped them to 45th. After their weekend against Iowa State, they are up to 35th, which is awesome, but still a significant drop from where they would be if they had Saunders available. But they are trending in the right direction with a much-needed win against Iowa State at home. Texas Tech was 12th before the JT Toppin injury. They dropped to 40th after his injury. Both of those teams make sense because they have star players and not a lot of depth. So figuring out which players are going to fill the gap in their absence is tough. And so that's why Tech dropped almost 30 spots. They are now up to 34th, up from 40th after a comfortable win against Kansas State over the weekend, but have kind of lost their likely hopes at getting to a Final Four this year, which is really sad. UNC has Caleb Wilson out. The hope is that he'll be back before the tournament, if not sooner. UNC is in the 40s, I think, when Caleb Wilson is out. Henry Vasar has also been in and out of the lineup, and if both those guys are out, the rating really drops. I think they're in the 60s without both of those guys. They're two-star players. So continue to monitor that going forward. Hopefully UNC is full strength by the time we get to the tournament, and we won't be having to have this conversation, but that's where both of those teams fall in the injury adjustment. The last thing I want to touch on is my updated efficiency landscape graph that I put out on social media on Monday. This basically looks at every single team's offensive and defensive rating at EvanMiya.com on a graph, and then I actually break this up into tiers of title favorites, Final Four potential, hit or miss, happy to be here, and the rest. And those thresholds are mostly scientific, especially the title favorites one. The way that I determine the title favorites tier on Selection Sunday is you take the top rated team at EvanMiya.com, whatever their relative rating is, you subtract 6 from that, and every team within 6 of the best team, those are the teams that I'm calling title favorites, and the last 10 national champs have been in that tier on Selection Sunday. So right now, Michigan and Duke have kind of separated themselves a little bit. I mentioned this earlier in the show. At least according to the metrics and how good they're predicted to be going forward, Michigan and Duke are kind of above the rest. Best 2 defenses in the country and a considerable gap. Again, doesn't mean no one else can win, but there's a bit of separation there. But there are 4 other teams that fall in that title favorites tier that are just close enough, and that would be Arizona, Houston, Florida, and Illinois. Purdue slightly misses the cutoff there, but if they had a good game or 2, they could easily find themselves in that conversation. The Final Four potential tier is pretty wide. I think there's about 16 or 17 teams in that tier, but there's a pretty big gap between the top of that group in, let's see, Purdue, UConn, Iowa State, and Gonzaga. And then there is a big gap, and then you have the rest of that group, which is in no particular order because they're all kind of bunched similarly here on the graph. Nebraska, Michigan State, St. John's, Tennessee, Virginia, Vanderbilt, and Arkansas. Those teams are in the Final Four potential tier, talented enough to make a deep run when playing well, but not near the top of the group, and there is some separation there. Some notable teams in the hit or miss category. This is what I call teams that will make noise in March and others that will flame out. So it's a bit hit or miss as to what they'll do. Some notable teams in this tier. Louisville, I think, is the best team in this tier along with Kansas. St. Louis is in this group. Kentucky is in this group. Wisconsin is in this group. Utah State is in this group. Ohio State is still in this group. Now, it is not a guarantee by any stretch they make the tournament. I still think they are stronger than what their resume shows right now. And so if they get in the tournament, that will be a very interesting team to sort of discuss as possibly winning a game or 2 in the tournament. But they absolutely need to take care of some business to get there in the first place. So those are my overall takeaways there. There were some teams on the very boundaries of this graph, like San Diego State has a great defensive rating, very horrible offensive rating. Oklahoma is kind of the flip side of that. Great offense, horrible defense. They're kind of lingering in the happy to be here group, but slightly worse than that. So, but again, if you want to check out that full graph, you can find it on Twitter, on Instagram, on Reddit as well. I posted in all of those places, the efficiency landscape. I will have an updated version of this once we have the field the day after Selection Sunday, where we can see where all of these teams fall. So be sure to check that out once we get the official bracket there. One last item to get to is the winner of our listener contest, which I announced last week. The contest was listeners submit which team they thought would improve the most in their overall rating at evanmiya.com from when they submitted it to Sunday morning. We got a lot of submissions to this. The winner of this kind of surprised me because the team that improved the most submitted by listeners was by Justin Kane, who submitted Nebraska. Nebraska moved up exactly 0 spots in the rankings this week. They lost to Iowa on the road and then beat Penn State by 23 at home. So not a great week for Nebraska. That was the best team picked by everybody. I am very disappointed in the listenership of this show, and I thought you all would be able to do a better job of predicting things going forward. We're going to have to improve this as we get towards the bracket, because if we had a bracket pool right now, I don't know if this group would do very well. So congrats to Justin Kane, but I'm expecting better from you guys. Justin, I will be mailing you your free merch item from the EvanMiya merch store in the mail shortly. Well, that's a wrap for our show today, guys. I really hope you enjoyed it. We are getting ever closer to March. We will be back next Tuesday with another show. Again, this is an ad-free show as always, so please help support the show and give it more momentum by giving us a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. We need more of those podcast reviews. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. I know there are a lot of people who watch this who have not yet subscribed, so please click that button. I love to read off reviews or comments that I get from people who are reviewing the show. Got a couple YouTube comments today. Giddy Troop said, another great episode. Loved having Ryan join this week. This is for last week's episode with Ryan Hammer, which was super fun. At Adam Nelson 2248 said, great show. And this was a fun one. There was a guy named Kaysen Kaufman 5675 who said, it was great meeting you at Cameron on Saturday. You got to get Ryan to make a trip. So I went to Cameron Indoor Stadium for their home game against Clemson last week. And I was first time for myself in Cameron Indoor Stadium. I'm sitting in the media row, which is right on the court, and you've got the entire student section literally right behind you. I had a guy tap me on the shoulder and say, hey man, I love your stuff. I love the show. And I was like, hey, that's awesome. This is my first time in Cameron. And he said, it's actually my first time too. I'm not even a student. And this ended up being Kaysen who left a comment on the YouTube. So great to meet you, Kaysen, and thanks for the comment there. It was great to meet you. And thank you to the rest of you for listening. This has been awesome, and it truly means a lot to me, the continued listenership as we ramp up towards the best month of the year. I will see all of you guys next Tuesday. Thank you.